Okay, so welcome to the news conference and welcome to ICANN52. Without further ado, I'm just going to introduce the speakers that we have. We've got Fadi Shahadi, President and CEO of ICANN. We've got Dr. Steve Crocker, our board chair. And Akram Atala will join us a bit later because he's right now having a GDD update. So Fadi, if I could get you to start by saying a few words to our journalists, friends. Thanks.
Thank you, Liana. Good afternoon to everyone online and here in the room. I'm Fadi Shahadi with ICANN. Today we launched the beginning of ICANN52, our 52nd meeting, reminding everybody that our very first ICANN1 was also here in Singapore, and we were here a year ago for ICANN49. I think I want to reflect on the year since we were here for ICANN49. ICANN49 was a few days after the U.S. administration announced the plan to transition the stewardship of IANA. March 14th was when the U.S. announced, and I think we were here maybe the 19th or the 20th. So this was a very momentous meeting because the community, after 16 years of U.S. stewardship, was receiving the news of the decision of the United States government to end the stewardship phase and allow ICANN to go forward. And here we come a year later, watching how the process has evolved and how our community has engaged in order to build the proposal requested by the U.S. government. And I must say, as my comments this morning emphasized, that our community has shown incredible depth and incredible commitment to actually do the right thing and develop a proposal for the U.S. government. First, on the human side, the hundreds of people involved in all the tracks to produce a proposal that addresses the key questions the U.S. government asked in a way that leaves everyone comfortable with where we're heading. And then on the process side, we have shown how ICANN can bring business interests, civil society interests, government interests, like few organizations can, and rapidly build in the span of a year multiple tracks of processes that I am confident will produce the right result. I just want to say, to refer to a comment I had this morning with Minister Yaqub Ibrahim. He was asking me about the transition, and in the process of explaining to him where we are, he simply asked me a very direct question. He said, I'm very pleased with the progress, but is all of this going to lead us to a regime that maintains the current stability and security of the domain name system and of the affairs of ICANN? If that's the case, then good. Otherwise, I need some assurance. So I gave him the assurance that, and I give you the assurance that the security and stability of the system are bigger goals than ending the U.S. stewardship. They are our goals from our inception, and there are goals through this phase, and there are goals after this phase. So nothing we do should reduce the confidence of the world in our ability to operationally maintain the security and stability of the Internet. So we look forward to a week of hard work. This is a week of hard work, and look forward to the global community coming together and advancing the work of the transition. And finally, just my job as CEO does not stop while all of us are quite busy producing the proposal. My job as the CEO is to ensure that the resources of ICANN and the teams at ICANN are supporting the community, are performing our operational functions with excellence, so that there will not be in any way or shape or form any degradation of our excellence at any time during this busy phase. And I'm confident from my point of view, that we are on track to ensure stability throughout this phase.
Thank you, Fadi. And Steve, would you like to share a few words as well?
Thank you very much. Let me echo a couple of points that Fadi has touched on. We, of course, are, everyone's attention is focused on the transition process and the examination of our accountability processes and so forth. But the last point that Fadi emphasized is absolutely paramount. We have a very substantial organization, we have a very substantial mission, and things don't come to an absolute halt just because we're looking at these other issues. We have a mission and we carry that out. It's a very substantial and ongoing effort with a lot of people, obviously. One element that is relevant to mention here is the globalization of ICANN. And it's particularly relevant to focus on it while we're sitting in Singapore, because Singapore is one of the 2 additional hubs that we've created over time. The other one's in Istanbul. And these hubs are making a big difference in our ability to serve the respective communities. So in particular, we now have the ability to have contracts that are in local languages with local law and with local currencies, as opposed to everything going through the U.S. These are substantive and very specific changes in our operation, all of which are oriented toward truly globalization and not just talking about it. And I want to thank Kwek for educating me a bit on what's going on. It was very eye-opening. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that, and you heard from the various leaders of the other parts of the ecosystem, is that ICANN is and will continue to be part of a larger ecosystem. It's not all about ICANN. I particularly liked Yari Arko's diagram that he used that showed the IETF, it showed ICANN, and it showed other parts of the ecosystem. And our commitment has been, continues to be, that we work with others as opposed to being alone. These things won't change during the transition. They won't change after the transition. They're part of the context that we live in, and if it didn't exist, then we wouldn't exist either. We've built an incredible team at ICANN. Fadi's leadership has been incredible. The board is solidly behind the staff and management, solidly and supportive of the community. Sometimes the board steps back to the point where the community can't tell what the board is doing. I had previously viewed that as the appropriate thing. We're now considering how to make it a little clearer, what we're thinking about, what we're doing. But it's a well-functioning system.
And I also want to take the opportunity to introduce Kwek, who's not on the panel, but Kwek Yu Chung is the VP and MD for Asia Pacific. So just in case you might have any questions about Asia Pacific, you can also direct them to him. So we would now like to open up for questions, and I'll just open it up to the people in the room first, whether you have any questions. So please let us know your name and where you're from, and then who you're directing the question to.
Hi, Bhavan from French news agency AFP. Can we maybe have comments from Fadi about what are the definitive goals of the meeting here in Singapore? I mean, there are these public meetings they go on every year, but just to educate readers about what are you expecting out of this? Because it cannot be that you're always meeting and you're saying that you're moving towards to your end goal of transition, but every meeting has some kind of objective, right? So what are the definitive goals of this meeting here?
Thank you for your question, and indeed, ICANN holds 3 such meetings every year since its inception, and even before the transition was on the agenda, we clearly had quite a bit of work on our plate. But to give you a sense of what is happening at this meeting, for example, we have a large number of sessions, a little north of 300 sessions that are going to occur this week. These sessions deal with everything from policy development discussions, policies regarding various parts of the ICANN domain name system. We have meetings from security experts that get together to produce recommendations and advice to the board on how to maintain the security of the internet. We have meetings across communities for understanding between them. For example, the Governmental Advisory Committee would be meeting with those who make policy for the new GTLDs to build bridges of understanding and discussion. You heard, for example, this morning that the country code names supporting organization are meeting with governments to discuss something they call the framework of interpretation, which manages how country codes can be moved or redelegated, as we call it at ICANN. So there is a lot of work that happens at ICANN meetings. This is an intense week of work that occurs for policy development, for advice development, and certainly for reviewing the security of the domain name system and the identifiers we work in. Finally, just what happens this week is also cross-ecosystem meetings. Our chairman mentioned the fact that we are only part of a much larger ecosystem of organizations. Most of these organizations are here. They're represented. And so the ecosystem is large. It includes technical organizations like the IETF. It includes policy-making organizations as well, like the Regional Internet Registry. APNIC would be the one for this region. And then other interested parties. So, for example, law enforcement officials from around the world will be here, and they will have their own meetings to discuss how law enforcement interacts with the domain name system. Now, you know also that in addition to all of that regular work, we do meeting after meeting. At this particular meeting, there's quite an intense set of activities around the stewardship transition and the accountability of ICANN. So it is not simply reporting on the progress of these activities. They will actually be working meetings where the members of these committees will meet and advance the work so that we can meet, hopefully, the timelines that would keep us in a successful envelope for the transition. Does that address your question?
You also talk about, I mean, it seems that the biggest stumbling block is a political one between governments for a consensus to be reached, right? So are there plans for some kind of meetings of high-level political meetings of various governments, including the governments that are opposed to the multi-stakeholder process, so that, maybe at G20 or a high-level meeting where this issue is on top of the agenda?
So I'll answer your question in 2 parts. First of all, yes, there are many high-level meetings that will occur here. We have senior government representatives and ministers coming from a number of countries, and they will be meeting amongst themselves and also with the ICANN leadership to discuss their concerns and their aspirations out of the transition. But I want to comment on the first part of your question. I don't think the issue right now is an intergovernmental agreement on the transition. I think what is going on now is a very straightforward response to the U.S. government's request that we have a true consensus-based, open, inclusive, multi-stakeholder proposal presented to them. And that takes work. I mean, I don't think that there are governments standing in the way of the transition right now, or governments pushing for the transition. I think all governments are engaged and would like to see how the community, which includes governments, by the way, we have cross-community working groups, all of them have government representatives, and business, and civil society, and technical people, all engaged together to produce these proposals. So right now, I am quite confident that some of the blockers, because of concerns of security or concerns of capture or concern, I think these blockers will slowly fade as good proposals emerge from the community through the consensus process. So the purpose of these bilateral meetings would be less about convincing anyone one way or the other, and instead they would be meetings to ensure that these governments have full visibility to the process and hopefully full participation in the process. So at the end, we can all stand up with confidence and say, this was an inclusive, legitimate process. And if we don't pass that test, the U.S. government itself said, I will not accept the proposal. So there's a high test here from the U.S. government themselves that said, if this is not a consensus proposal, if we have a huge backlash from the community itself saying this is not a consensus proposal that was steered one way or the other by ICANN or the ICANN board or the ICANN staff, it's important we maintain a neutral, constructive role that supports finishing this.
Maybe you can talk about ICANN's role, in regards to the GTLDs. There's been some controversy about .gay and .LGBT, for example. Can you talk about the process that's involved and the kind of challenges that you face in administering this area?
Happy to talk to it. Thank you for the question, and you mentioned a couple of specific strings, gay and LGBT, that touch on a particular topic. It's actually an extremely positive situation that we face. When ICANN was formed in 1998, it was charged with a number of things, and one of them was promoting competition and opening up the domain name space. And we've come at that very carefully and very deliberately. One piece of promoting competition was to separate the registries and create registrars so that there was competition in the pricing and the sales, and that led to a dramatic opening up of the expansion of the domain name system in terms of the number of registrants. The other part was to promote openness with respect to access to the top-level domains. And we took quite a bit of time and we experimented. There were some smaller experiments in the era of 2000 where we wound up creating a few domain names. After quite a bit of deliberation and this experimentation that I said, the decision was to broadly open the space so that the default is any string you want you can apply for, and then to look at specific situations where there may need to be some constraints. I'm not going to be completely comprehensive about, but geography was one, country names that relate to countries. Another was communities in particular, like the strings you name. Another is sensitivities around things that imply credentials or professions like doctors or banks. And what happens in this situation is that we then wind up moving from a pure engineering situation of just moving strings around to things that begin to touch various elements of our lives and other aspects of society. We do not want to be, we are not in the business of regulating content. We do not make social policy decisions, but we're sensitive about the fact that these expansions touch on areas that other people feel strongly about. So we've tried to put in place mechanisms and procedures for those kinds of questions to get sorted out, but to get sorted out in a way that provides as much openness and as much flexibility as possible. It's an inescapable consequence of the fact that the internet is a global environment that crosses all kinds of borders, and it brings people into contact from different cultures. And I don't want to be more specific, but it is just part of the growing evolution of what it means for us all to share one planet, and distances become smaller and interactions become more frequent. So discussions around specific strings are where some of those interesting interactions between cultures get sorted out. And our role, as I said, is to be as light-handed as possible, to be as non-directive as we can, and to provide a forum, and maybe in some cases multiple, for all of the parties who care to come and interact, and then things move forward. I will say that even if some decisions don't match what individual parties, cultures, countries, and so forth would like, it's very unlikely that any single decision is going to be catastrophic. So these things have a certain amount of gray area involved, and we together, and on behalf of the community, find our way forward as delicately as we can. No perfect solutions to anything.
Just to add to what my chairman just said, that specifically, to be clear, on the application for .gay, there has been some misunderstanding that we are not granting the application for .gay. That's not the case. There were simply multiple applicants, and we have a process where an applicant could say that their application is a community application. And community applications, according to the policy that we are working with from the community, have certain privileges over standard commercial applications. And so there were multiple applicants for .gay. One of them applied under the much more precise rules of a community application. And an independent panel, not the board or ICANN staff, an independent panel that reviewed that application came to the conclusion that this application did not meet the community-specific criteria. That's all. Now, the applicants can continue with their application. It's just that they will now be competing with others who applied for that string on an equal footing, as opposed to being on a community level. So, and again, that was made by an independent panel, and in no way reflects a certain social engineering by ICANN or bias if in any way. This is simply a process, and the process is moving forward.
Thank you. I'd just like to introduce Akram first, especially to the people in the Adobe Connect. So Akram Atalar is our president of Global Domains Division, and he just joined us because he just finished an update. And we do have a question on the floor here, but Akram, if I could just get you to just give a brief 1-minute short summary of what you'd like to tell the press, both in Adobe Connect as well as in the room here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for attending the call. One of the things that we've updated the community on today is our progress on and performance in a lot of different areas. It's important to bring to everybody's attention that IANA, for example, continues to operate behind the scenes a flawless operation for years. So we come to the ICANN meetings, nobody asks the IANA team, what's going on, what are you doing, because they do their job day in, day out, in the background, flawlessly, and that's very important thing to remember. They don't get the praise, they don't get to stand in front of everybody and present, because everything is happening great. So I think it's very important to focus on the things that happen behind the scenes. We also, it's important to look at the new GTLD program and see where we are today and where we've progressed. We have to date signed almost 800 agreements for new TLDs. We have delegated over 500 new TLDs to the root. Some of the registration levels, people are asking, are these the expected registration levels? Is the program successful? The area I focus on is that the three goals of the program from the beginning. The three goals were to provide choice. And it's obvious that we're having a lot more choice in the domain name system. We wanted to have competition. And competition is not only about being able to register a domain name for $8 instead of $9. That's not material. What's material is that with the introduction of all of these domain names, there are a lot more service providers coming into the ecosystem, which means there are a lot more email providers coming in, hosting providers coming in, web developers coming into the space. With all of these incoming resources that are going to come to the domain name area and compete in this market, we're going to see more competitive landscape, and therefore the ownership of a website or a domain name is going to get more competitive. And that's what the program is about. It's not about just having a name for cheaper by $1 or 50 cents. It's about actually being able to have a presence on the internet that is a lot more competitive, therefore reaching out to a lot of the areas where, we call them underdeveloped or whatever, but reaching out to these areas and having a presence on the internet a lot more competitive, a lot more affordable. I think that's key to the program, and we're going to see this. It's going to take some time. This program is not about how many registrations do we get in the first month of the launch of a TLD. It's about what's going to happen 5, 10, 20 years from now. This program is like the internet. It's the way the internet is going to look 10, 20 years from now. And the last but not least is the innovation on the internet. And this is happening as well. I think that we're seeing a lot of new business models in the domain name system. We're seeing a lot of TLDs come up with innovative ideas on how to be present on the internet. But the key focus, I think, is when the brands the brands come out with their domain names, because that's where they're going to represent themselves in a different way, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in that space. In the geos, we've seen a lot of innovation there, where cities are now having an identity online. So this is new. This was not didn't exist before, and we look forward for a lot more innovation in the years to come. So basically, I think that the new GTLD program is successful. It's happening. It's taking its due course, and we're going to see a lot of benefits from it in the future. Thank you.
David Goldstein. I wrote for a few blogs on domain name issues. Just on the .gay issue, there was a panel decision recently. Was it right that there was an overturning of a decision, or is it just a review of the decision? But just following on from that, it's because it's been somewhat controversial and not focusing specifically on .gay, are there lessons do you think that can be learned from that process to make sure that community groups may, well, not so much easier, but community groups invest a larger proportion of their resources into an application than, say, a large brand, and to give them assistance, whether it's a geo community group or a group such as .gay? Like, are there lessons that, you know, in a future round that you can assist them better?
So let me just clarify a couple of things, and then I'll give the floor to anybody who wants to add something. But on the panel decision, it was not the panel decision that was overturned. The applicant exercised one of our accountability mechanisms, and the board committee that looks at these things decided that there was a mistake in the performance, in certain aspect of the performance of the evaluation, that it required the provider of the CEP to actually re-look at the CEP. So basically, the community evaluation process. So basically, the board asked the provider to set a new panel and review the .gay application for CEP. That decision has not been finalized yet. We might see the same outcome that we had before. We might see a different outcome. We would have to wait and see what the panel decides on. Regarding the community applications, I think that it is the bar was set high by the community on when somebody says that this application is a community application, how to evaluate it, because there was in the community belief that gaming could happen. And if the bar was very low, then everybody will apply as a community, and therefore now there is no advantage. So they set up the process and the evaluation to be to a high bar, therefore making it harder for applicants to game the system. Now, if you, in hindsight, you might look and say there should be a better process than this to help communities be able to participate in the GTLD program and get TLDs. That was one of the advice of the GAC to provide better outcomes for communities. I think that the review process that we're going through, that is looking at how the current round has been going, will provide us with a lot of input for hopefully a better second round that will hone in and provide a better environment or application processes for communities to be more successful. Thank you.
I do have a separate question. I'd also like to know, Fadi, what your attitude to domain hoggers was at the moment. If you...
I think that the statement I made in a different to a different media outlet about that was conflated to signify that I was including in this all those who are in the domain name business, and that's not true. There are those that do this as a business and do it very well and actually enhance the market, and there are those that do it and actually make the business and the market less attractive and less really desirable. So I think that any insinuation that that statement kind of engulfs everyone that is in this business is not true. As you know very well, I'm a very big supporter of the industry groups, and was one of the people that frankly was very happy when the Domain Name Association was created, and I attended their first formation meeting. So this is where we stand, and I think we continue to feel good about how the market is evolving and how these players are making the most to make this a good market that serves the public interest.
We have two questions from the Adobe Connect. It's from Monica Elmat from Heisey. There were some technical challenges earlier on, so she missed part of the start of the conference. They couldn't get audio, but this is the first question. For Fadi and Steve, when will the window of opportunity for IANA transition, again mentioned by Ira, close?
Sure. Ira provided a very interesting perspective on that question. There's been a sense among some that there is fundamental tension between doing it right and doing it quickly. And Ira's point was that, in fact, those things go together as opposed to being in opposition to each other, and that taking too long to do something may get you a bad result as opposed to a good result but a late result. Excuse me. There is no precise, absolute stroke of midnight deadline, but there is a general sense of pace and, to some degree, some urgency. Aside from any of the specific context about U.S. politics and so forth, it's natural in any of these situations that you can only focus attention for some period of time, and then everybody gets tired and other things become important. As Fadi said when we began, we've now been at this for the better part of a year. So it was mid-March last year. We're now in mid-February, so it's 11 months to be more precise. And that is a lot of energy. That is a lot of time. That is a lot of money, and being focused on one issue or one collection of issues. And in addition to whatever it costs directly, it has an indirect cost of taking time, money, energy away from everything else. So aside from any discussion about specific windows opening and closing, just on its own merits, it's important that we bring things into a decision process very quickly. Over the next several months, I would say few months, but to move it along, and to do so with a sense that we want to stick at the center of the issues as opposed to the small points around the edges that people might disagree about. The nominal date is the end of September this year, which coincides with the current expiration of the contract. I think that's actually a very helpful target time. People work to deadlines. Governments even work to deadlines. I think that is an important date to keep in mind. If we fail to have something on the stroke of midnight on September 30th, the world will not come to an end. But we should also not just say, well, casually, therefore we have no time. So I think that's an important time frame to keep in mind.
Thank you. She has a second question. Again, it's for you, Steve. She's asking if you can give an update on where ICANN will go with EWG and who is next.
I'm sorry, I missed one little piece of it. Where ICANN will go with respect to?
With respect to EWG.
Oh,
and
EWG.
who is.
Excuse me. Thank you. So there will be some. I think there will be some careful briefings of this. We are headed to a policy development process in the GNSO. We have been very deliberate about this process, as Monica I know knows well. We had the expert working group deliver an extremely thorough and excellent report. We have been now taking our time to look at what issues need to be resolved and when do they need to be resolved. We will move forward toward a policy development process, and let me give a look past that. The output of that will lead to a set of recommendations for implementation, but will leave still plenty of room for doing more careful work on some of the very detailed, I'll call them engineering-oriented issues of how do you structure these things and what are various contingencies and so forth. So I'm expecting that we will move forward toward a policy development process. I don't want to be specific here about exact dates and timelines, but this is getting continuing attention. It's probably worth mentioning that this is a very, very good example of the kinds of things that Fadi and I were alluding to, that transition issues are, of course, occupying much of our attention, but this is one of the big things, for example, that has been and will continue to be very much on our plate and does not get lost, and that we do not lose focus on this while we're focused on the transition process.
If I could, I will add something to Monica's first question. Political windows open and close. We know that. ICANN has been waiting for this political window to open for 16 years. IRA Magaziner said that they expected that this contract between ICANN and the U.S. government would be lapsed in the year 2000. We're already quite late. So now that window's open, we need to be aware that political windows are very fragile and they're fickle. There are a lot of factors that affect these political windows. I think our chairman's point that from a practical standpoint, we've had a year at this almost, and if we need a few more months, we have them, because as he said, the world will not come to an end on September 30th. Having said this, we don't know what factors could affect the political window. We do know that 2016 is a heavy electoral process in the United States, and therefore the oxygen that is available to certain items may be very easily consumed by the electoral process. So I think those who are genuinely committed to the quality of the proposal we will give the U.S. government are correct that we should not put deadlines. But those who are trying for their own purposes to delay this transition, make no mistake, we know that the most powerful political tool to kill something is to simply delay it. So we're aware of that. And so our community is alert, understands its responsibility, understands that we could build things with expediency without sacrificing their thoroughness and their quality. We don't have 2-3 people in a corner trying to come up with that. We have hundreds of people directly involved in this process to ensure that every possible scenario, every possible concern is addressed so that we can finish on time and deliver to the world what the world has been waiting for in that window that is open now.
And if I might, let me just align the point that you just pressed about, just made about hundreds of people with the beginning where you said ICANN has been waiting for 16 years. It's not just ICANN that's been waiting, it's the community has been waiting for this window to open. And the community is now engaged in taking advantage of that opportunity and working forward on it.
So I want to take that to Asia Pacific context, and this is a question that posed to me by local journalists who are at, well, the INR stewardship transition is a hot topic, and the ICANN community, well, the INR stewardship transition is a hot topic, and the ICANN community is all banging their heads around how to get this across. But in the Asia Pacific context, the awareness of this is a little not as up to date as North America, for example. So in a nutshell, why do you think the layperson, or why do you think Singaporeans should care about this transition? What do you want to say to the man on the street?
Thank you for that question, Leanna. First and foremost, I would like to assure our many friends in the region that the Asia-Pacific region is very active in this discussion. I'm very happy that for the numbering community proposal, for example, the chair of the drafting committee is Izumi Okutani, one of the greatest contributors from the region. She hails from Japan. We thank her for her services. I think the question about the perceived apathy towards the process, in some ways is a signal of the kind of trust they have in the internet they have been experiencing for so long. For many Singaporeans who start their day by checking email, looking at WhatsApp messages, or checking their Facebook updates, at the back of their minds, they are not beginning their day by thinking, I wonder if the domain name system is going to work today. I wonder if ICANN is getting its updates to the DNS right or wrong. So in some ways, I think we are victims of our own success. I think another way of looking at this is that with companies and governments and different bodies putting increased investments in the Internet of Things and in cloud technologies, again, they are making assumptions about the future that the Internet as we know it is going to continue. So I think that is also a way of answering the question. Why is this important to Singapore? Why is this important to the region? Simply because we are banking on the fact that when we wake up in the morning, we're able to get our email. We're banking on the fact that the investments on the Internet of Things and cloud technologies are going to work. And if we are going to bank on these, it is important for us to be involved in the discussion to make sure that we engineer a shared future that is set up for success. So I think this, in a nutshell, I don't know if Fadi or Steve or Akram would like to add to that, but I think especially for the Asia-Pacific region, the home of approximately half of the world's internet users, especially to all of you out there. I think this is an important process, and I would like to assure you that there are many from the region who are working hard on this process, but we always will welcome more. Thank you.
Thank you, Quek. Just want to check whether we've got any more questions. David, you have a question? Go ahead. Would you like to... Okay, then any more questions in the room? If not, I think we'll close the press conference. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, gentlemen, as well. And have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated. Good to see you again. Thanks.